Ric Grenell, a senior advisor with the ACLJ, is joining us now to discuss this latest announcement by the Biden White House that they will send Vice President Harris to the border. They are sending her to a part of the border that does not get as much action. It gets about half as much action, or even a little bit less than even half, as much action as the Rio Grande encounters, which was up to 51,000 plus in May, just in that area. El Paso is at 20,000, around that number in May. So, but I want to go to Rick on this because, Rick, we know that President Trump is going next week. We know that that was announced about a week and a half ago with members of Congress, with the governor of Texas, and I'm sure he's not shying away from going to the hot spots. But now we have this announcement yesterday, after nearly 100 days, that Vice President Harris is actually going to go see the problem for herself. And what do you think was the final? I mean, I know the pressure's been high on Harris, Rick, from the conservative world, and even from some Democrats who have said they're not taking it serious enough. What do you think was the final reason why they said, okay, we're going to make this trip?
Follow the leader. She's following Trump. There's just no question that she is going because President Trump is going into the hotspot, going exactly where this crisis is, to highlight the fact that this border crisis is new. We had fixed the border in the Trump administration. There's no question about that. Their rhetoric, the Biden administration rhetoric, Democrats' rhetoric became unbelievably welcoming for illegal immigration. And we've seen the individuals wearing Biden shirts. The crisis has been manipulated and made by this team. And so I think that they're seeing the pressure of the crisis unfolding and getting worse every single day.
Yeah.
And they've got to stop it.
You know, I think, some politicians, Rick, are calling this the Biden border crisis, which I think is probably, at this point, an accurate assessment. But here's what's interesting. And one of our associate producers pointed this out. We had, just a couple of weeks ago, babies thrown over the wall. All right, dropped. And that wasn't a significant enough crisis for the Vice President of the United States, Vice President Harris, to go to the border. But what seems to be motivating to go to the border is the fact that the former President of the United States is going, and as you said, your policies, when you were the acting DNI, those policies worked. These policies are not working. That's why you have the increase. Going to a sector, as Jordan said, that is less than half of the encounters in, let's say, the Rio Grande area. So this is, to me, it's been a poor excuse, but this is a real crisis on the border. And you've said before it's a national security crisis.
It's a national security crisis. And you know what is really shameful is that the Trump administration always had pressure from the media to not politicize issues. And I think that's a very good warning. And for those of us in government, it's always a really good kind of reminder. Don't politicize. You're working for the American people. And I think the Trump administration did a very good job of focusing on the issues and not letting the politics get in the way. And matter of fact, sometimes when the pressure came because the politics weren't working that hard, the Trump administration stood firm in the face of bad news or confronting crises, because sometimes problems need to be fixed and you have to go in and things get messy. But what we've seen from this Biden administration is a constant politicization of so many issues. Look at prosecutions and DOJ. That's completely become political. We know the border crisis has been political. We had it fixed, but their rhetoric of 18 months in the lead up, and then once they were in charge of the border, there was a rush by illegal immigrants to come over the border, because what they heard for 18 months was that they would be welcomed and that the laws would be pushed aside. A sanctuary country. That's exactly what they heard. And then when faced with the humanitarian crisis and all of the problems, the Biden administration is clearly having second thoughts of their rhetoric.
Ambassador Grenell, I'd like to ask you a question. Senator Blackburn of Tennessee has made a statement that I agree with totally, but I'd like to get your view and your take on it on a broader plane. She says every state is a border state. Do you agree with that? And can you just comment on that for us?
It's such a good point because I think those in the media and many politicals really just focus on those border states, and we assume in that that analysis, we assume that those coming across the border are going to just stay in those states. And I think that's a really naive assumption to think once someone gets over the border, they're going to stay in Texas or California, Arizona. No, they actually get out pretty quickly because they know that there's a saturation of the problems that are happening on those border states. And so what now we see are illegal immigrants crossing the border in those states and quickly going into the Midwest, going into the North. They're trying to get to places where they can get jobs and get as far away from the border control authorities as possible.
You know, Rick, instead of, you've been in politics a long time, in government a long time, instead of just going right away, things were bad, but it was early on in the administration, going on right away, and if you want to say, so you've seen the problem, maybe making a couple trips, don't make it such a big deal. By making it such a big deal, and this feel that it's been like the American people and Republicans, you said it's kind of been politicized, and a handful of Democrats who actually have to deal with this because they represent the border districts have finally said. But then I think it actually increases the weight of this trip. I mean, it's now a very, very serious trip. It is not. If it was done early on, I think this could have been something normal because she was tasked with it. But instead, they've drawn all this attention and all this focus, which makes it, again, fraught with peril for the vice president.
This keeps happening to the vice president over and over. She keeps making political mistakes. And I really chalk it up to the fact that when she was in Sacramento and even when she's in Washington, she was largely just covered by the California media. And the California media is worse than the Washington, D.C. media. They have given her a pass for a very long time. She's not accustomed to really tough questions. When you're a Democrat in Sacramento or in California in a political office, it's a cakewalk. You don't get any tough questions. And so when you finally get on the national stage, you're not prepared because you haven't been roughed up. And I think that this is the case with Kamala Harris. She is clearly not ready for the national stage because she hasn't had the scrutiny. Even when she was running for president, she dropped out too early to get the real scrutiny.
Yeah, no, Rick, I absolutely agree. Thanks for joining us as always, Rick. I mean, this idea that putting everybody understands in politics, when you put things off, you're building it up, and you're making it a huge deal. They're trying to play that down. That I think Jen Psaki tried to make it sound like normal business. Oh, now it was the right time.
But now the vice president, she's visiting bakeries in Chicago. She's marching in parades, which is all fine. But go to the border
she
too.
Done all of that,
do
plus
all
the
that,
border.
and while you're out, take the plane down, Air Force 2, down to the border, and say, what is going on down here? I got to get a better handle on this.
Get briefings.
I have no
get
problem
reports.
with the other stuff she did. I just think it's obviously a political move to stay out of it. Thanks, Rick. We appreciate you being with us.